My name is Ibrahim Traoré, and today, I'm not here to whisper, I'm not here to negotiate, I'm not here to ask for permission. Today, I speak with the voice of a continent that has been silent for too long. I speak with the fury of a generation that watched our grandparents bow their heads. I speak with the iron will of young Africans who have decided enough is enough. And this message is for you, Monsieur Macron. Your authority in Africa, it's dead. Not dying, not weakening, dead. And I'm going to tell you exactly why. Let me be crystal clear about something, Macron. Your power in Africa was never built on respect, never. It was built on 3 pillars, and I'm going to name them right now. Fear, dependency, and lies. For decades, you made African leaders afraid. Afraid of losing your aid. Afraid of your sanctions. Afraid of your phone calls at midnight telling them what they could and couldn't do in their own countries. You made our economies dependent. You controlled our currencies. You controlled our banks. You controlled our resources while telling us you were helping us develop. And you wrapped it all in beautiful lies. You called it partnership. You called it cooperation. You called it friendship. But we see it now. We see it all. The fear evaporated. Your pressure, powerless. Your threats, they mean nothing to us anymore. Because here's what you never understood, Macron. A people humiliated long enough eventually stops fearing their oppressor. You thought we would stay on our knees forever. You thought wrong. I want you to understand something about this generation. We are not our fathers. We are not our grandfathers. They lived in your shadow because they were told they had no choice. They accepted your advice because they were told Africa couldn't survive without France. We don't believe that lie anymore. I look around this continent, 1.4 billion people, the youngest population on Earth, unlimited resources, unlimited potential, and you want me to believe we need France to exist? No. What we needed was to wake up. And Macron, we're awake now. You wanted Africa to be your laboratory, your testing ground, your strategic backyard where you could experiment with policies you'd never dare implement in France. But here's what happened. We turned the laboratory against you. Today, we are the ones experimenting with courage, with sovereignty, with independence. We're rewriting our destiny. We're redrawing our mental borders. And that destiny, it doesn't include you. I know what terrifies you, Macron. It's not our anger. It's not our military. It's not even our alliances with other powers. What terrifies you is this. Africa is moving forward without you, and we're not looking back. You thought if France stepped away, Africa would collapse. You thought we'd come running back, begging for your return. That was your calculation. That was your bet. You lost. The void you're leaving, we're filling it with something you never gave us, dignity. You wanted to be indispensable. Today, you're irrelevant. You wanted to be unavoidable. Today, we go around you. You wanted to be respected. Today, we don't even hear you anymore. And this isn't coming from one president. This isn't coming from one country. This is coming from an entire continent that whispered for decades and is now shouting, "We are sovereign, we stand tall, and no one will govern us from Paris ever again." Let me tell you how empires fall, Macron. They don't fall because someone attacks them. They fall because they're built on foundations that cannot hold. You built your influence in Africa like a house of cards. Card by card, interest by interest, network by network, corrupt leader by corrupt leader. But you forgot something simple. When the wind changes, the house collapses. And we are that wind. We are the young soldiers who refuse to fight for French interests. We are the young economists who refuse to keep our money in French banks. We are the young leaders who refuse to ask Paris for permission to govern our own people. Your system isn't being attacked, Macron. It's collapsing under its own weight. Today, our people see clearly. Today, they understand. Today, they say no. No to your domination. No to your dependency. No to your arrogance disguised as diplomacy. No to your commands disguised as advice. You don't control our institutions anymore. You don't control our armies. You don't control our economies. You don't control our minds. You don't control our future. Africa is not an extension of French foreign policy. We're not a chapter in your history books. We're not pieces on your chessboard. We are free. And you cannot stop this. You want to know why Africa is turning away from France? Look in the mirror, Macron. You treated sovereign nations like your annexes. You treated elected presidents like your employees. You treated 1.4 billion people like children who needed your guidance. You demanded from us what you would never accept for yourself. You interfered in our politics while screaming about sovereignty when anyone questions yours. You acted like you owned our future. And now you're paying the price. That price is total rupture. Not a temporary disagreement, not a diplomatic tension, complete separation. You tried everything to keep control. Paternalistic speeches? We stopped listening. Veiled threats? We stopped caring. Economic sanctions? We found other partners. Media campaigns? We built our own narratives. Military pressure? We built our own defense. Everything failed. You thought one statement, one tweet, one presidential address would make us bend, would bring us back to the table of obedience, would remind us that France decides and Africa executes. That era is over. Over because Africa opened its eyes. Over because we broke the invisible chains you thought were eternal. Macron, you made one fatal mistake. You confused influence with domination. You thought Africa was a permanent dependency, a space to monitor, a territory to correct, a people to discipline. But you never understood the most important truth. A people disciplined by force will always become indomitable. Did you really think we would stay obedient forever? That generation after generation would live under your supervision without ever rebelling? We are the generation you never saw coming. We are the generation that doesn't tremble when you speak. We are the generation that looks at the past and says, never again. You don't have our armies anymore, we expelled your bases. You don't have our governments anymore, we elect leaders who refuse your commands. You don't have our resources anymore, we're taking back control. You don't have our streets, our cities, our public squares. You don't have our consciousness. You don't have our youth. And that is what terrifies you most. Because a liberated people is never a silent people. Because a standing continent is never a controllable continent. Because a conscious generation is never a purchasable generation. Let me say this directly, Macron. Your word has no value in Africa anymore. It doesn't make anyone tremble. It doesn't convince anyone. It doesn't seduce anyone. When you speak, African people don't listen. We observe. We observe your contradictions, democracy for France, dictatorship support in Africa. We observe your interests, resources over people, always. We observe your strategies, divide and control. We observe your calculations, profit over principle. And we say, enough. You accuse our leaders of ingratitude. You accuse our people of radicalism. You accuse our sovereignty of threatening stability. But let me tell you what we accuse. We accuse your system of suffocating our potential for 60 years. We accuse your policies of deliberately underdeveloping our nations. We accuse your companies of stealing our resources while we stayed poor. We accuse your arrogance of treating our voices like noise. We accuse your methods of humiliating our people daily. So yes, we're angry, but our anger doesn't destroy, it liberates. And now you threaten us again. Economic blackmail, diplomatic isolation, political sabotage, military intimidation, media warfare. None of it works anymore. You cannot threaten people who have nothing left to lose. You cannot intimidate a continent that has decided to stand. You cannot reverse a historical awakening with colonial tactics. Macron, Africa is not your zone of submission. Africa is not your backyard. Africa is not your adjustment variable. And this, whether you accept it or not, is permanent. People watching this understand what's happening right now. This isn't a political disagreement. This isn't a diplomatic crisis. This is the end of an era and the birth of something new. For decades, France profited from our division. You encouraged our conflicts, you fed our rivalries, you manipulated our politics, you placed your puppets. But here's what you never anticipated: a continent unified by one simple idea. That idea? We don't want you as our master, our partner, our supervisor, or even our reference point anymore. We decide for ourselves. We choose for ourselves. We align with ourselves. And a continent that aligns with itself cannot be governed by anyone else. Your real problem, Macron, isn't Africa. Your real problem is the end of privilege. You're not afraid of our speeches. You're not afraid of our leaders. You're not afraid of our armies or our reforms. You're afraid of losing a continent you could exploit freely. A continent where your companies extracted wealth without accountability. A continent where your political interests came before our human rights. A continent where your words mattered more than our votes. That privilege is gone. And you can't handle it. Here's your biggest shock, Macron. It's not geopolitical, it's not military, it's not economic. It's that you lost control of our narrative. For decades, you wrote Africa's story. You defined our heroes and our villains. You determined our priorities. You set our limitations. You told the world who we were. Not anymore. Today, we write our story. We build our symbols. We choose our heroes. We create our vision. We define our future. And a people who write their own history can never be ruled by others. You lost Africa the day Africa stopped fearing you. Because it was never your military that impressed us. It was never your economy that dominated. It was never your diplomacy that won. It was fear, and fear is gone. Without fear, your authority is nothing. Just theater, just performance, just illusion. It's worthless. Brothers and sisters across Africa, listen to me. We've entered the part of this message some people wish would never be said. The part where masks fall. The part where illusions shatter. The part where I speak without filter, without fear, without compromise. Macron, you thought Africa would keep whispering. You thought we'd keep asking permission to breathe. You thought we'd keep begging for scraps of respect. No, that time is dead. Buried. Finished forever. You lost the monopoly on Africa's voice. For decades, you told the world who was good, who was dangerous, who was acceptable, who needed guidance. Today, we speak for ourselves with our words, our anger, our pride, our history that you never understood. Let me tell you what really terrifies you. Not Africa angry, but Africa awake, educated, and united. Because divided Africa was your comfort. But standing Africa, that's your defeat. You were used to giving orders. Now you receive answers. And let me be clear, we're not at war with French people. We're confronting a system that thought Africa was its backyard. But that system is trembling now. Trembling because it has no foundation, no influence, no respect. It trembles because it doesn't know how to negotiate with courageous people. It trembles because it has no grip on African youth. This youth doesn't listen to you, doesn't admire you, doesn't fear you. We look straight ahead at a liberated horizon. Macron, the classroom is closed. For decades, you came to tell us what was right, what was modern, what was acceptable, what was civilized. You were convinced your models were universal, your values superior, your decisions to be followed blindly. That time is dead and will never return. Because Africa doesn't just accept evaluation anymore, we evaluate you. We judge, we compare, we choose alone. And what we've chosen is not your road, not your system, not your control. We've chosen absolute freedom. You still think diplomatic words will make us sleep, that state visits will impress us. But you know what happened? You lost the only tool you had left, illusion. The illusion that you were indispensable. The illusion that nothing moved without you. The illusion that Africa waited for your decisions. Today, the world sees Africa advancing faster without you than ever with you. And that's a shock you cannot digest. Let me end with this. Macron, you're not the compass anymore, you're the obstacle. You thought you were the direction. You became the stone in the road. And when a people decides to move forward, nothing stops them. Not even those who once pretended to represent the horizon. You're not the example, not the guide, not the model. You're the permanent reminder of what we refuse, what we reject, what we cut away without hesitation. Before, you were seen as essential. Today, you're just another spectator watching a story unfold that you cannot edit, cannot control, cannot shape. And what shocks you most? It's not our anger, not our freedom, not even our defiance. It's that we don't need you at all. Because a free people never waits for permission to be free. They rise, they speak, they advance, they forge their path, they become masters of their destiny. And that's exactly what Africa is doing today with a force you never saw coming. My name is Ibrahim Traoré. I am 36 years old. I am a soldier, a son of Africa, and a voice for the voiceless. And I'm telling you, Macron, and telling the world, Africa bows to no one. Africa stands, and Africa is free. The age of French domination in Africa is over, and it will never, never return.